Today's postcard is postmarked the Channel Islands. We're on the island of Guernsey. Evan, before we reveal all as to why we're here against this building, should we just look at the background of Guernsey a little bit? Because the reason this building was built, ironically, was protection against France, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely so.
And yet, when you think of Guernsey, it came as an inheritance from the Normans to England at that time.
Yes, it did, because in 1066 we were part of the Duchy of Normandy, and there were possibly Guernsey and Jerseymen in the fleet that actually landed at the Battle of Hastings. And from that time on, of course, William took the crown of England, and he took the insignia of Normandy with him. So I think even to this day, the pennant of the Queen, or the flag of the Queen, carries the dukedom of Normandy still on it. But in 1215, Normandy returned back to mainland France, but the Channel Islands decided to stay loyal to that part of the British crown which was originally Normandy. And so we then became part of Great Britain. But the French, of course, from that time on, decided they'd like us back. And throughout the centuries, they invaded. They didn't invade, they actually attacked the islands and tried to recapture them. There were sea battles off here in the 13th century. They never landed on Guernsey, not on this coast anyhow. They landed at St. Peter Port, and they occupied St. Peter Port for a couple of years, I believe, and Castle Cornet for 5 years. But they actually had a battle of St. Helier in Jersey. So we were always under threat from the French.
It's strange then that giving the position of these islands so close to France, it really would have been in their best interest to have gone back to France, wouldn't it?
I think it
would have been a lot less hassle.
Yes, a great deal less hassle.
So we get to this point when the whole of Europe is overrun by Napoleon.
Yes.
And we are well versed on postcards with Martello Towers.
Right.
But let's find out about this building, because that's what it's not. It's not a Martello Tower, is it?
No, it's not. They were built in between 1778 and 1779, pre-Martello Towers. Martello Towers, we have three here, were about 1804. Now, these are called loophole towers because of the loopholes that can be seen in them from which they could fire muskets. But they weren't built because of Napoleon. They were built because of the American War of Independence.
Really?
Yes.
Now, there's something we like to hear.
Absolutely so.
Something new, a little bit of learning, yes.
You see, on the American War of Independence, the French decided to go with the settlers and against Britain in their War of Independence. And so once again, we came under threat from the French because of the American War of Independence.
Now, that's a new one. There's not many people, including me, and I love history,
sure,
and I never realised, therefore, that the American War of Independence actually carried right across
a long way away. That's right.
Because obviously the French had their own vested interests in North America.
Very much so. And we were so close to them that to gain a little piece of Britain again, rather like Hitler did many, many years later,
yes,
was for the same reason. And so we're under threat, and thus these towers were built, 15 of them altogether, of which there are still 12.
And were they ever under attack from the French then?
No, not at all. No. No, never.
So they did their job, a deterrent?
Well, that's right. I suppose one might say that the French did land in Jersey, and they never landed in Guernsey, and local historians might say that's because we were better defended than those in Jersey.
Because you had all of these loopholes?
Absolutely so. They have some loopholes as well, but they're slightly different from ours.
So what would it have been defended with? I can see lots of guns around me.
These guns are a little later. The guns around us are 1804 again. But when the towers were built, and the 15 were built in 7 months, between 1778 and 9, built of Guernsey granite and some brick. They would have had a captain in charge and a sergeant, and they would have been regular British soldiers from the garrison. But the 20 men who manned them and a couple of batteries around them would have been all local militia. And not only local militia Guernsey, but local militia from this little part of Guernsey, from the Vale militia.
Oh, the parish of Vale.
Yes, indeed, very much so.
Right.
And there would have been 20 of them manning this with the gun position, but originally they would have just had muskets inside and a carronade on top of the tower, which could fire canister and all sorts of rubbish at the enemy attacking. But eventually then, of course, in 1804, which is a few years later, they brought in the bigger guns, the 24-pounders and the 9-pounders, which are around us now. The 24-pounder could fire 2 miles, an iron shot 2 miles, which is a long way.
What would an attachment's life been like? How long would a soldier have been stationed here?
Well, the militia, of which I taught, would have been quarrymen, farmers and fishermen. So they would have only manned the tower when the captain and sergeant called them in.
So they would have gone home?
So they would have gone home. But in fact, mostly it was their wives who manned them.
Really?
Because, of course, they were fishing and quarrying and farming, and they were allowed to substitute their duty with their wives. So very often there were wives and children manning the positions.
No. And there were 15 originally?
Yes, there were, yes.
And how many have you got left now?
We have 12.
So what happened to those other 3?
The Germans knocked one down.
Oh, no, did they? That's a shame.
Yes, one fell down.
Yes.
And I think we knocked another one down for road improvements a long, long time ago.
Now, if you think this is some cute little cottage for the milkmaid to live in while she milks the cows over there, you would be so wrong, it's hard to believe, because this is the magazine, and it was built in 1804 to equip the tower up there with all of the black gunpowder it needed to fire the 9 and 24 pounders, which you can see on the tower itself. But you know what I find fascinating about this? The ingenuity of war and how people's minds think. Here are some vents, and they were constructed so that if anybody landed here, they couldn't throw any grenades or shoot firearms through there, and of course blow the whole lot to smithereens. You seem to be a man of passion for something like this. What does it take? What does this mean to you? Is this Guernsey history, or is it just something you love about the military? What is it that really drives you to want to talk about these places?
Well, it's part of our most remarkable history, Russell. Certainly, as you expressed, the unusual history of always defending ourselves against the French when we were originally French.
Yes.
And my name, Ozanne, is a French name, Norman French name. And I think it's the depth of history, the unusual history that we have against the French. And then, of course, subsequently, the Germans occupied us in the Second World War. But I think it just epitomizes the strength of island feeling against the enemy at the time.
The Guernsey way of life now, it appears very British, and yet there's a lot of autonomy here, isn't there? I've seen the word bailiwick used a lot.
Yes.
Is that an old French word?
Yes, it is indeed. Yes, indeed. And the bailiff, who's appointed by the Queen, is not a bailiff who comes along and takes all the property from your houses. He's the head of our royal court, the head of our magistrates' court. In fact, he's the head of our population, appointed by the Queen. Has to be a man, has to be a lawyer, and has to have studied in France French law, because many of our documents are still in French, many of them. And so he would have had to have studied in Caen University. Has to be a man. And then, of course, we have a lieutenant governor appointed by the Queen again, but he has no authority in law over here. He merely represents the Queen in military matters. Not that we have any army any longer, but he doesn't have a vote at all. Whereas the bailiff, as I said, is the head of our legal system, the head of our population.
So we're now in a position then of this island being very close to Britain, but not a member of the European Union.
No.
Is that for political reasons, financial reasons, economic reasons?
I think it's for all of those reasons, actually. We do have representations through Britain under a protocol, which is Protocol 2, I think. But we make our own laws. We change our own laws, but they all need the authority of the Privy Council of Her Majesty. So we don't have any link directly into your Parliament. We have it through her Privy Council.
Crown dependence.
Absolutely so.
Right?
Yes, rather similar to that, yes. And Jersey is the same. The bailiff of Guernsey is only for Guernsey and the islands that come under us, Herm, Sark and Alderney, whereas Jersey has its own bailiff and its own lieutenant governor. But there have often been cries about us having special position here and being a little bit too dependent on Britain, but I think we're best left as we are. We don't call upon Britain to support us financially at all. We're quite a wealthy little island, actually, with tourism and with banking particularly these days, and I think we're best left as we are.
And when it came to the Second World War, a lot is said that Hitler used the Channel Islands as I've actually invaded the United Kingdom,
sure,
because these are British.
Yes.
What was the sense of feeling here on Guernsey against the Nazis?
Well, I wasn't here. I was evacuated when I was 1 and came back 5 years later. I think many people have criticised in books over the years, in answer to your question, of collaboration here. But I think people ought to realise when they're criticising Guernsey, as some of them do, that the Channel Islands who were left behind, about 19,000 of them altogether, with at the height of the occupation 16,000 German soldiers, that they didn't know that the domination was going to end. No. We could have been German forever. And so I think they started to live together, and I think that was understandable. And any collaboration was minute, but I think they had to live together. They had to obey German law. It could have gone on forever.
As they say, all's fair in love and war.
Well, indeed, very much so.
Well, Evan, thank you so much for showing us around your little part of Guernsey.
Pleasure, Russell. Thank you.